Great. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. It's great to have everyone here for tonight's program on the resilience of the Afghan people inside Afghanistan. My name is Amy Jenkins. I'm a board member of the World Affairs Council Tacoma, and we're so happy to have all of you here tonight. So thanks for coming. If this is your first program you're attending of ours, the World Affairs Council is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization working to promote public understanding of international issues and helping our members gain confidence in engaging the global community. We are grateful to have the support of our sponsor for tonight's program, Tacoma Creates, as well. Marnie Gustavson has been the executive director of PARSA since 2006. PARSA is a grassroots organization working to support Afghan communities by engaging in leadership, economic empowerment, and advancing social change and protection. Marnie's work focuses on developing leaders who have an appreciation for human interconnectedness and an interest in developing sustainable systems that promote all people having access to equality and economic opportunities. After the Taliban regained control of Kabul in 2021, PARSA launched some new initiatives, putting girls at the forefront due to imposed regulations on their livelihoods. So tonight, Marnie will discuss her background and experience working to encourage leadership and positive change in civil society in Afghanistan. So just in terms of run of show, Marnie will be presenting for about 20-25 minutes, and then we'll have a good amount of time for really engaging Q&A. So if any of you have any questions, please share them in the chat throughout Marnie's presentation. You don't have to wait until the end. Just go ahead once those questions pop into your head. You can pop them right into the chat so that we have a good list of questions for Marnie. And then once we start our Q&A, John Lucas, another board member of WAPT, will be managing that portion of tonight's program. So with that, I will welcome Marnie again. Thank you so much for your time tonight, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Amy, and the other people with your council. So a couple of things. I have a long history with Afghanistan, and I actually live there with my husband currently. So I do really encourage your questions throughout my talk tonight. I'm interested in what is important to you as well. So I learn from you during the course of this presentation. So in 1964, my parents who had 3 daughters, decided they were tired of the US and wanted an international experience. My father applied to be a teacher in Germany, and a job in Afghanistan came up for him at the American International School of Kabul, and my parents moved to Afghanistan for 4 years, and I was about 9 years old. I'm the oldest in my family. And the experience was really life-altering, not just for me, but for many people who have grown up in Afghanistan. And we left with my family around when I was 13, but just really was never finished. And so after my sons were in their late teens and in their late teens to 20s, I decided to take a trip back with people like me who had gone to school in Afghanistan. And then what happened is I just kept going back. So as soon as I came back from a trip, I went, 2 months later, I was there again. So what happened in my relationship with Afghanistan, there was a lot of people who like me who have gone, but there's just something about the people, something about the country that just was comfortable for me. I learned to speak what's called Dari. It's a derivative of Farsi when I was a child. And when I went back, it was after the Taliban had fallen. So it was really close on that. The city was destroyed, the country was destroyed. It was just the beginning of the US and international involvement. And uh, I I don't know how to say it. The experience of being in Afghanistan became very current. I traveled. I knew Afghan families were part of. I was just very immersed in it. And during one of those trips, Mary McMakin, who is the founder of PARSA, and what PARSA means is it's a long name, Physiotherapy and Rehabilitation Support for Afghanistan. And what happened is I ended up staying with her while I was trying to find a home for my husband and I to live because I had actually decided to take a contract with the UN, what's now called the UN Women. It was called UNIFEM, to train and develop parliamentarians, women leaders, to be a part of the government and part of the parliament. So, I met with Mary. I stayed with her for a couple of weeks, and one day she disappeared. And I said to the staff, I said, "Where's Mary?" She said, "Oh, she's gone to the US." And at that point, the staff started interacting with me as the second best thing to Mary. And the long story short, I don't think there's been any time in Afghanistan where I didn't live with Parsa. And in fact, what happened is my husband and I found a house, and then Parsa moved into our house with us. Mary was a physiotherapist by profession. She was, I think, 86 at the time, had been in the country for over 40 years. Her children had grown up and gone to the same school that I went to. So there's a kind of a subset of students, former students, the American International School of Kabul, that really have Afghanistan in their heart and have participated in numerous different ways. And I connected with Mary over that. In 2006, Mary asked me to take over PARSA as the executive director. It was originally a volunteer position, but I decided to do so as opposed to try to fit into the development world because there was a very big difference between being immersed with the Afghan people and you might say the development industry. At that time, there was a lot of money coming into the country. It was quite competitive, and I really felt like it missed the mark. And when I wanted full control over a small organization, as opposed to trying to fit in with what other leaders of we call them country directors were doing. So in 2006, I took over PARSA. And my approach, I came to Afghanistan to do leadership development, and my approach to developing PARSA was to find people, Afghan people, with a passion, with something they cared about, and to bring them into PARSA and to start supporting them. So physiotherapy dropped by the wayside. I'm not a physiotherapist. I have a whole different, mostly my focus in my career has been women and girls and marginalized people who are very fragile and challenged. And my husband is a psychologist. So the programs that emerged out of my kind of long history, now I've been there now, I would say over 20 years. The history that the program PARSA became kind of the home for special projects. But what we're really known for is projects that are driven by Afghan communities and Afghan leaders. And I'm going to just say something about myself. I had this, I'm going to say, very high profile job training parliamentarian leaders who are women. There was about 60 women. And I was so frustrated. I could not even get them to turn off their cell phones for training opportunities. It was really clear that they had very little relationship with education or training. It was a position of authority. It was a position they were entitled to. And really what I did with that, to my credit, is I said, everything that I learned in the US, I said to myself, I said, I have more skills as a mother than I do as an organizational development expert in this country. My skills as a mother, what I've learned as a mother, have more relevance to developing Afghans than my organizational skills. So I actually immersed myself probably around 2006, a little bit later, in learning for the last 20 years, learning how to make an impossible, absolutely impossible country, and the people, wonderful people in that impossible country, actually be able to um, take authorship over their lives, feel hopeful about their future no matter what the circumstances are. So I really have taught myself how to be who I am and how to develop PARSA over the course of the last 20 years. Significantly, so I will tell you one story because I don't think it's reflected in my little presentation. One of the things that is probably our key accomplishment is during the early years, probably about 12 years ago, there were two men that came to me. Oh, no, actually, I have to start back. We were working in orphanages, and my son was living with me. My younger son was living with me at the time, who was a young adult. And I was very frustrated because I was trying to come up with a training program that would get the Afghan adults responsible for these orphans out from behind their desks and drinking tea. So my job was to really turn or PARSA's job was really to turn the orphanages into a child-centered program. I was absolutely nuts about it, frustrated with it. And I was traveling with my son to central Afghanistan, and we were going over a pass in the province of Bamyan, where that is famous for the Buddhas. And my son saw a family by the side of the road, and their vehicle had fallen into the ditch, and there's this little family shivering by the side of the road. And Reese, my son, said, Mom, I'm going to stop for them and see if I'm going to pull them out. And I said, oh, okay, that's great. And he went around back to our car and pulled out equipment, like a winch. I mean, he had all kinds of stuff back there I didn't even know was there. It took him about 5 minutes, hooked up the car, pulled the car out, got the family on the way, and came back and got back in to drive our car. I said, Reese, where did you learn that? You did not learn that from me. And he said, Mom, I learned that from scouts. So my scout master taught me that. Be prepared, serve people. I said, Reese, that's it. That's the program that needs to go into these orphanages, is the Scouts program. That's the program that will have the kids have activities and have a sense of themselves distinct from the adults. That's the program. So during my course of getting that program set up, I met a young man and a very old man with no front teeth, Mustafa. Mustafa had been a scoutmaster before the Russians attacked Afghanistan. Tamim was a scout who had been mentored by the International World Scout Association. And they met with me, and I said, I want to hire you. Will you please do my programs? And I actually took $1,500, hired the two of them, put them in these two orphanages to start the program. 10 years later, as the country fell again to the Taliban, PARSA had rebirthed the National Scout Program, which existed before the Russians had almost 20,000 participants, was registered with the World Organization, Scout Organization. 10 years ago, PARSA had scout troops in all provinces, 600 scoutmasters. We completely revived that program nationally. And we didn't do it because of me. We did it because of my Afghans. And it was a dream and a vision for them. And as Kabul fell to the Taliban, unfortunately, the leads in Kabul, and I was with them. They were acknowledged for being the 171st, I think, country to join the World Organization Scout movement again. By in a conference call, but at the same time, they had to put that registration on hold, basically, and have the Philippines branch proxy it because of the change in the government and the regime. So that is an example of our signature program. And at the time that we had 10,000 scouts in all 34 provinces at the time that it fell. So, it's an extraordinary achievement, really, I'm going to say, because my board of directors, and our supporters are profoundly, profoundly clear that Afghanistan's going to change, not by outside involvement, but it's going to change by the people that are in that country. So, what I'd like to do is just do a presentation. It does not include all of our programs, but here's how I'm going to preface this presentation, which is when the country fell to the Taliban in 21, most nonprofits organizations like ours are severely challenged with continuing to work, and mostly because of our committed staff, we were able to stabilize and continue to do our work pretty quickly. But one of the biggest issues that happened pretty shortly, about 6 months, 8 months later. So first, the girls' schools were closed to girls 12 and above across the country. And then the Taliban issued a decree, or the supreme leader issued a decree saying that women, and this is specifically to what's called NGOs, non-governmental organizations, women could not continue to be employed or work at non-governmental organizations. And that was from the UN to PARSA, which is a relatively small nonprofit. So it impacted the entire development scene. What I did at that time, none of us thought it would last. We couldn't even begin to fathom how the government could consider functioning without females in the NGOs. The NGOs were responsible for doing the humanitarian assistance across the country. But the setup financially is that with the Taliban not being recognized, donor countries will not support the government. So it was almost like there are two systems in place. It was the NGOs being funded by international donors, and then the government. It was really more of a political decision, much more a political decision than an issue of religious compliance. I went to my staff, and at that time we had about 125, and I said, we have to change the way we're operating. At that point, we had our Scouts program. We have reviving Scoutmasters who still are in the country, which was extraordinary, that they were starting really within 3 to 4 weeks of the Taliban takeover. They had started their scout troops up again. So I went to the staff that are working with youth, and we had the Scout program, but then we had actually two intensive programs that were born out of the Scout program to really support the needs of the Afghan youth. So the Scout program meets weekly, does events, community service activities. The secondary program that is associated with the Scouts is called Sisters for Sisters and Brothers for Brothers for the youth. And that's done 5 days a week, with very intensive activities for a smaller but more select group of kids. So I went to the staff and I said, how are we going to do this? And in particular, how are we going to educate her? How are we going to get access to education for our girls? And what they came up with is now what we call PARSA homeschools. So pretty much every child that was in our program at that particular time, was given the tools to take, including the boys, were given the tools to take, books, a whiteboard, all kinds of activities. They were each given a package and told to go home and start their schools. And they're what we call self-organizing schools. They're not um, they're not an official, if you might say. In other words, they're not official. They do the materials include the national curriculum, all from kindergarten all the way through, or the curriculum that was there um before the Taliban took over. So we put together these packages, and the scouts, everybody, we were in 17 provinces, everybody got to work. And I think within 3 months, we had over 3,000 students enrolled. We had a number of different levels of school. One is just a community school where they just figure out what they're going to do. But we also had online schools for our Sisters for Sisters, which are girls aged 12 through 21. And this, again, the speed, the thoroughness, they self-monitor themselves. They have a network of classes and that's conducted through WhatsApp. The way they monitor themselves, the way they encourage each other, it was just phenomenal. So we are now into about a year and a half of that particular program with no end in sight in terms of the girls going back to school yet. But again, going to the resilience, or going to the spirit of the Afghans, who are in a very, very different cultural environment now, a very different government. There's literally, it's hard to even tell the rules are applied arbitrarily. The work that my staff has done is really a tribute to the Afghan character. So that is my intro to our presentation. I just want to do, it's a short presentation, but just give you a sense of, and this is for you. I'm ready to stop seeing my tired face and see my presentation. Okay, go ahead and change screen. So our mission and strategic plan is really simply to train and develop Afghan leaders. Change slide. This is the entryway to PARSA. PARSA is in our main offices are really quite extensive. We're in the Afghan Red Crescent Society's large, huge 20-hectare property. And we are embedded with it's called the Marastun. They're all over they're in 5 different areas of the country, and it's the Afghan traditional version of a housing development for very poor people who don't have a means of an income. Go ahead and change the slide. I think I've gone over that. Next slide. So we currently implement programs in 17 provinces. Go ahead and this is the list of our programs. Really all of them with up and coming emerging Afghan leaders taking the lead on the program development. Go ahead. Go ahead and shift. So I noticed on the last thing, one of the things that we incorporated, this is a homeschool. I'm pretty sure this is run by a scout. And you can see that there are women and there are girls. The homeschools, it's really up to them how often they want to meet. We asked for 3 afternoons a week, and we've been surprised to find that many of them meet 6 days a week, in whatever time that they have. One of the key pieces of the homeschools is a psychosocial program that my husband, Norm Gustafson, introduced to PARSA. It's called Doing What Matters During Times of Stress. It's a peer counseling program where there is a manual and there is a program, but support groups facilitated by our beneficiaries actually conduct the program. I'm pretty sure now, as of a year and a half, all of our homeschools actually have what we call psychosocial activities and support group activities. And I'll show you a slide of what that means. Part of this is a program developed by the WHO. It's being implemented in 50 countries, but it actually includes meditation. And one of the things I said to my husband, who's been with me over the last 20 years, I said, did you ever think in this culture that's so resistant and so doesn't know what mental health is, that you'd ever see families meditating together? Go ahead and change. This is a boy. He's Brothers for Brothers, and his family and his students. His name is Jawad. Go ahead. So these are all over the country in different settings. Go ahead. Oh, yeah, I'll show you again. There'll be another one. This is Bamyan. We actually have a little office there that's going to be expanding actually this month. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yes, this is a meditation, and that's me with a guest. And this is them doing their mindfulness meditation. Go ahead. And again, I think these are just slides we wanted you to see. Homeschools include boys and girls. They are family-based. How I've never had a problem with them, and the reason I've never had a problem is they're not for girls and women exclusively. They are the responsibility of the family. And inside of the government structure, family is regarded, respected, and given quite a bit of latitude. Go ahead. There are people of all ages. One of the most exciting things that emerged is this year, some of our senior youth have taken on a literacy program for women, where the young students are actually teaching their parents. Go ahead. And again, these are different provinces. Go ahead. And again. And again. Kandahar and Nangarhar are right in the deep south, the deeply conservative communities. It's a real accomplishment for us to have schools there. Go ahead. And go ahead. This is one of our favorites, which is this young girl is teaching her father how to use the computer. Go ahead. Again. Yes, so they do when they have a computer, their computer training is available. Go ahead. And I think that's it. Yeah, this was our Women's Day with my staff. The girl to the left of me, Makbula, I've known for since she was 8 years old. I think she's 19 now. And she's one of our senior trainers and on staff at PARSA now. Okay, ready for questions?
Marcia, yep, go ahead.
Thank you. This was fascinating. And thank you so much for making the time to do this. I have so many questions. So I'll just kick us off and maybe I'll get some other people's creative juices going.
Okay.
So is the Taliban aware that this training of girls is going on? Is the fact that it's in a private home makes it okay? Are the teachers or the students at personal risk? Are you at personal risk considering you're fomenting revolution here with training these women? Are you known to them, and are you worried about your safety? And how does all this pass under the radar?
Under the radar's been a bit tricky. I think I did one media interview last year, and about 2 days later, there was kind of I'm not sure if it was associated, but I wouldn't be surprised. There was kind of an uproar about online schools. It's not risky. The Taliban, we're used to a pretty cohesive, organized government. The Taliban is not monolithic. It is run the way Afghan society has run for thousands of years. There is a central authoritarian leader, the supreme leader, and then there are various things that they enforce to be in power, but they're relatively few, but they actually work quite a bit by consensus. Um, the the political line from the Taliban is Afghan girls are entitled by Sharia law to an education. So, but the public just needs to be patient until we reorganize the school system to match the Sharia law. So they're not. Although it's being driven by a very conservative cultural value out of Kandahar. And the supreme leader has, informally said, under my watch, no girl over the age of 12 will go to school. But in terms of the way that it's managed, we have not run it. Every once in a while, we'll have to coach, or we'll have to kind of, negotiate with a local leader who says, are you sure you should be doing this? But it's always been positive, and the neighborhoods really support the endeavor. It is a resistance. It's a very peaceful kind of resistance to the current authority. I don't feel at risk at all. I was much more at risk before the fall. To some degree, I'm just going to say that there's a narrative about Afghanistan that gets into the public news, into the public internationally, that does not reflect the reality on the ground.
How so?
When I do personally train my boys, and I said to them, I think 2 weeks ago, I said, how does the rest of the world see you as Afghan youth? And the boys were accurate. They said they see us as terrorists. The world is in kind of starting with some of the most skilled people in the planet, is in this battle over what's right and what's wrong, with the international community outraged about the rights violations. But I'm going to say, having been there for the last 20 years, the international community made very little effort to understand the country they were in 20 years ago. And the same thing exists in our public policy today, although it's starting to change in certain countries, mostly driven by Europe. So there's another thing that happened, which is a big outflow of immigrants who are terrified of the Taliban. And there were people that should have, left the country, that were at risk, but it was usually more out of personal grudges and a shift in power. It was not the policy of the new de facto government. So the narrative internationally is also driven by Afghans who left the country who are really mad at the Taliban.
Thank you.
More questions?
I have a question. Hi, Marnie, thank you for this presentation. In the 20 years that you've been there, did you see an evolution in the attitudes of men towards women or men towards girls? And if so, has any of that evolution persisted under the new regime? Is there a significant change in that regard?
Well, so there's a couple of things at play. One is the notion that Afghan men do not value women. And it's just not true. It's not true in the families. It's not true in the culture. As driven by war, the more protective features of the culture are in play. With the current government, the government makes the men responsible for the women's compliance or behavior. Can you hold on just a second? I can hear you. Okay. So, again, it is the filter of how we see women that doesn't allow us to see what's changed. That fundamentally there is I'm going to say, ethical problem with how the traditional culture views women, which is as property, and it's contractual. And that is thousands of years old. It's in around the world in different tribal cultures. So that is something that was attempted to change, and there was change that happened, very much so, during the last 20 years, but it was predicated on a Western system. And the work was not done in the communities to really have the culture buy off on it. It was predicated, it was paid for. It was not integrated into the culture the way in such a way for it to be sustainable. So we've lost all of the Western mechanisms for protecting women. Virtually all of them. We're starting a program this summer we call Safe Spaces. And I'm starting it with some experts in what's called gender-based violence. And I said to them, I said, okay, we'll figure it out. Figure out how to prevent violence against women with no legal system, with no advocacy, with nothing. And then I said, we should have done this 20 years ago. And we are starting a pilot program, a community-based, program that's not targeting women. Women are included, but to reduce family violence, which the government agrees is a problem. They don't agree that women suffer more than men. And it's really not for them in their culture and the way they see things. Their job as Afghan men are to protect women, and that's what they're doing. So we can shut our heads off and scream and yell and do everything else. But if you're talking to people who say, hey, I'm protecting my wife, I'm protecting my daughters, I love them. The attempt at forcing the issue is going to not affect change.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me? I don't know.
I can.
I was kind of curious. Have you ever spoken somewhere in the United States to let people know, let's say in a PBS or something, or shared like what you shared with us? Is that something you would do, or would that harm what's going on over there, or what? Yeah.
No, I would do it. I would do it with limitations.
Yeah. Because I mean,
Like,
we got to educate us, I mean.
yeah, I agree.
Has anybody asked you to do that? Anybody? Or maybe they're not aware.
Yeah, the last 2 to 3 years, I've been pretty close to the chest in terms of what I'm doing, because the last thing I want to do is to have one of our beneficiaries suffer.
Yeah.
So I haven't been that forthcoming, and I would have
I
to be
see.
forthcoming. And the honest truth, if I'm going to be really honest with you, the media is looking for a particular message, and that's not mine.
No, I mean, I think most of us on this screen agree with you 200%. I mean, come on, the truth and everything.
I'm just
Oh,
saying is that I have to be really careful when I'm
you
working with
do.
people, because
You
they're
do.
looking for a sensational
Oh,
message.
gee.
What I am saying is, well, guess what, folks? We have another generation of Afghans to raise, these kids. And for me, they
Yeah.
have names. These are kids I involve myself with, I learn
Yeah.
from. So how are we going to do that? That's not a sensational story.
No. It's us. It's our country. I don't know. I just frustrating with.
I know.
Thank you. I just
Our
opened
country.
our eyes.
It's not just your country, just so you know.
I know, but it's just, well, what's going on here is just, anyway, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question, Marnie.
Uh-huh.
Hi.
Hi.
I don't know if you remember me, Jody Nankivel.
I do, Jody. I saw that you were on.
I'm just wondering if you can give an overview of how life, a short overview of how life has changed for the Afghans in how they can just operate daily life out in their world, compared to when we were there in the 60s and 70s, compared to 10, 20 years ago to now. What?
Yeah, it's hard for me, Jody, because I live there. So
Right.
my home is I think Afghans are funny.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't like to be told what to do, and they have
Right.
lots of different ways of getting around it. I prefer the current environment to the environment when the US and NATO had this massive presence. I prefer it.
That's the sense I was getting, and I was wondering whether that was
Yeah.
the way
It's like, it's like living in a large village, as opposed to this huge security complex.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I mean, I'm surprised that I prefer it. There's a lot of social pressure. You should dress this way. You should do this. You shouldn't do that. There's a lot of this. And that gets tiring, that gets exhausting. But, and for me, to the logistics of moving my female staff, the logistics of doing programs is onerous. And my staff is really tired by, you know, really the degree that we have to kind of jump through hoops, the degree of hostility from various members of the government, although usually sitting around and talking and various having different conversations breaks that up, and then we have an ally.
Mhm.
So, you know, our strategy is to build allies. I'm very frank with the Taliban. I talk with the leaders.
Good.
I'm not on for this restriction of girls and women. You know, I do not agree with you. But I'm not your enemy. I'm here for 20 years, and as long as you're here to serve the Afghan people, I'm cool, I'm good, and we're gonna keep talking about it. So, you know, I say the same thing to the leaders. I just say, you can count on me to be honest with you about this. I have to listen to these girls. You're not listening or talking to them.
Good for
Uh,
you.
What? I mean,
Good for you. Are they
yeah,
starving? I mean, you hear about them starving. A lot of people are starving over there.
it's very hard. It's the hardest
Yeah.
I've been,
Yeah.
in terms of foods. We've been through periods of time where our children are not eating. Coming to school, not having lunch was really a problem. We've never served lunch, but you know,
Yeah.
we've gone through different things. Most of the activities I'm working with are out of Kabul. I think in the provinces, it's pretty awful, and it's
Yeah. Yeah.
awful with people who don't have a voice. So,
But you
um,
don't hear anything more about what's going on over there.
yeah,
You know.
and you know, people don't know. We work with the Afghan Red Crescent Society, and their mandate is humanitarian. And I just met with the director, who's a Talib. He was one of the negotiators in Doha. And I sat down with him because I just wanted to let him know, you know, what we're working on, ask him what his priorities were. I was just so impressed, because I've worked with the directors with Afghan Red Crescent Society for 20 years. I was so impressed with how smart he was, how dedicated he was. And I asked him, I said, you know, for future programs, what are your priorities? I said, is youth a priority? He said, no. What's a priority is there are women in this country who do not have husbands, who do not have a family to support them economically. They must be allowed to and be given an economy. Now, this is a Taliban who's on the cabinet,
Wow.
one of the top Taliban. And he talked to me for 15 minutes about this issue. He was so upset about it. And so it's not how it's being presented. And the way forward is, like with most tribal cultures, relationship, and they well, you know, I've done my time. They respect the fact that I'm older and that I've been there for 20 years, but they respect my honesty. And I make sure to keep our promises. So that's kind of our strategy. Not easy. We're pretty tired,
Yeah.
you know, as particularly the top leadership, with the kind of the chaos, the lack of clarity, the you know, periodic somebody popping up. The thing about the Taliban that's so hard is they are warriors, they're mujahideen, and how they manage is through threats.
Wow.
So that the first thing when they feel opposed is to threaten. But that's just the first thing. We're learning, you know, how to navigate and negotiate with them.
Hey, so I'm gonna jump in here. I just wanted to say we got a question from Cindy and Miriam coming up, but also other people have questions. You can put them in the chat, and then we can bring those to your attention if you're waiting to get a question in also. So, but Cindy, you had something you're gonna ask?
Yeah, thank you so much for your remarks and for offering a perspective of somebody who's lived in the country for so long and who can help us maybe shift our perspective on the situation in Afghanistan. And I appreciate hearing about the homeschools. And my question is, what can you tell us about the prospects of girls and women after they complete the homeschools or the educational opportunities that your organization helps to provide? I mean, are there opportunities for further education elsewhere? What economic prospects might exist for women and girls? I'd love to hear what the situation is like.
As a country, government and social, there's almost very little opportunity for girls and women right now. And there are women, amazing women out of work. We have 50 people, most women, I think there's 10 men, who receive $100 a month to do homeschools, to just keep them in the game. But what's happening, so I'm not happy. I mean, that's the situation, and the Taliban seem to have infinite patience with this particular situation. However, they just started women back to school for midwives. As midwives, they're starting. It's gradual. It's chipping away. We're chipping away at things. The change is gradual. But there are things starting to break open. What is fascinating about my crew, because how I learn is from what they come up with. I had in Sisters for Sisters, we had my program manager has turned 20 girls who get $20 stipend a month into teachers. And she's now doing teacher training for them and training, just basically giving away our homeschool. This is how you do it. You need a mobile home phone. Here's how you teach public speaking. Here's our math classes, giving away the curriculum. And what is actually emerging, which is really interesting to me, is that in communities, families are hiring our girls to tutor and to do programs at a very basic level. Our girls are starting to get work, and we're starting this summer what we call leadership and entrepreneurship. So all of them, virtually all of, there's about, I don't remember how many are in S for S. Alyssa knows our numbers, but I think we had 60. I think we're starting again with 40, but they all have small enterprises. They make this, they have crafts, they have things they sell to family. They're avid to learn how to sew and make clothes. And we're going to encourage that the best that we can, not from a top-down approach, but from working with them to discover what there's a market for. So what's fascinating is not, when you look at what the social scenario, what the government restrictions are, it's just like, oh my God, how can Afghans even exist? When you start to look at what they're doing in their families and their communities, what they come up with is amazing.
Hey, thanks. And we have a question from Miriam.
Good evening. Marnie, thank you so much for such an insightful presentation and educating us a lot. My question is, as you described, the situation is not very kind of happy and very heavily managed by government bureaucrats. What is your supply chain? How do you supply needed supplies for your education, whatever programs you do?
Well, I mean,
do you get them there?
Well, the weirdest thing, I mean, the market's full. So I don't know how they do it, but it's import and there's export. There's plenty of goods in the markets, at least in Kabul. We have to fund our programs through a UN cash drop. which means we our donors send money to a bank account in the US that then we send it to the UN, who turns it into dollars and flies in tons of money and deposits it at the bank. Isn't that weird? It's insane. We're still at war. This is what we call the economic war. So we're not having any problem getting goods in the country. There's plenty going on.
And another question quickly, and then somebody else can ask. You said that your staff is really tired and exhausted because they have to deal with lots of changes and bureaucrats. You know, everything else has kind of I call like a kind of expiration, you know, how much you can handle, how much you can exhaust it. What support is given to the staff to stay? Maybe that it's all they have available in terms of the kind of mental or in a way that they can stay and be still encouraged and appreciated and feel that they do they sacrifice pretty much their life to give the service of education. What do you do? What's your magic?
Not magic. Number one, they're responsible for their well-being. They are responsible for raising their voice, for taking care of themselves. We have a very flexible way of handling time off. We watch after them. We take care of them. PARSA is a pretty remarkable organization. We talk, we argue, we take care of each other. So it's really the organizational culture that we have created together is very, very nurturing for our staff. And, you know, even I'm just going to say with myself, you know, I'm starting, it's like, this is a year and a half where I created a program that was an intervention. It's now become normalized. So we're just, you know, we frequently stop and say, okay, what are we committed to? What's our future here? And not like we don't have a future, but we stay very, very much in communication about what we value and what we want to do. And I'm, you know, just being honest, it's probably one of the most exhausting environments to work in. And not just because of the Taliban, you know, donors who really, really want to make an impact in the country, but don't come into the country. Don't understand the country, don't understand the new bureaucratic systems. So in particular, NGOs are really squeezed between Taliban, who are upset about not having control over resources, and the donors are upset about the Taliban being in charge.
So I had a question kind of related to that, Marnie. You were talking before about the international community. You felt like you know, did not really take the time to understand Afghanistan, and that really harmed how they worked. And you've already talked about some of the ways in which people have these preconceptions of Afghanistan that are superficial or just plain wrong in some ways. And what are some of the other things that, I mean, you're probably not gonna be able to correct all of our misconceptions in just this hour, but like, what are some of the things that you feel like really you wish the world knew better or would be surprised to learn about Afghanistan?
Well, I mean, I've been representing them this way in this conversation. They're not victims. Proud people. They're not victims. They don't like a handout. Their leadership has failed them for decades. In most substantively the last 2 decades. What else do I want them to know? This is a strange thing for, you know, my job is to fund the organization. But one of the huge disservices, and this is really part of our American culture, is that we think money can make the changes. And we put way too much money in there without thought. And this is, I'm going to say the next decade of my working in Afghanistan is what does make the change. I actually really engaged with the international community. How can someone who's not inclined, doesn't really even need to come to Afghanistan, but feels, from very, very drawn to support and make a change there? How can they participate? That's actually probably my next decade of learning, is how to connect everything. I do think it probably is going to happen through online and through internet. But the blind spot, I mean, I'm American. The blind spot that we have is when we get upset about something, we think money is going to change it. And in fact, it's something else. What I'm learning about now, I just had a group of wonderful people come out just as tourists. Just before I came, then we went to Bamyan, but we went and visited a couple of homeschools so they could see inside and really report from an outsider point of view what's going on. And I walked them through and showed them what I'm looking for and what I'm trying to develop. But I reached out to my staff and I said, I need a homeschool. Virtually every homeschool leader begged for us to come. And it was just overwhelming. And then one of the things I learned is the power of witnessing, the power of recognition, the power of not being seen through the filter of the government, the power of community to community. I don't know if you guys have kids, but I mean, the kid comes home and shows you their homework. To the degree, and really what's going to be my learning is how to have a sense of the Afghans are being witnessed, honored, and respected for their resilience, for their accomplishments, and also to have the international community not seen as potential money. Their job is not to fund this, but actually as a diverse perspective. A new world. Every person that you meet that's different than yourself becomes a new possibility. So that's kind of what's my next learning, is how to really make the witnessing, the communication foundational, particularly in such a situation in Afghanistan. I mean, nobody knows what to do. I don't think this situation is precedented. They have a government unrecognized, without economy, and just this stalemate is just unprecedented in such a country that is now, to some, really, quite frankly, being viewed as a hopeless cause. But how do we see and witness the people there and really give them what they need to change their own lives?
John, can I have another kind of follow-up question?
Oh,
Marnie,
sure.
you mentioned that you have been communicating with the Taliban people because they are around the country.
Mhm.
From your experience, do they seem I would say, care what they want to do?
Way, way much more than the former government.
Okay.
Very, very principled.
But do they feel frustrated that they cannot do or accomplish because the supreme leader maybe have a different outlook than they do?
It's emerging. I would say 75% to 85% of the Taliban leadership do not agree with the supreme leader.
Ooh, wow.
And they express it. They express it in the press. They express it personally. They say, okay, so how is this going to end, folks?
And we don't hear about that.
He says, well, he'll die someday. So am I. So no, it's not popular.
Okay. And like you also mentioned, like donors don't visit this place, but they demand to accomplish what they require. Maybe there's a fear because going to Afghanistan and visit because of course, the publicity and media and
Mhm.
all the above. Do you
I
feel
don't,
that there's
yeah,
a
I don't
fear
judge
of
them.
visiting?
I
Fear.
don't judge them about that, but there's a way of making informed decisions.
Mm,
And if you're in charge of millions of dollars worth of resources going to Afghanistan, it's scary how those decisions get made
okay,
and how uneducated, uninformed people are.
okay.
Have you talked to any of them about that?
Me, I absolutely every opportunity I
Oh,
get.
good.
Spoke with Norway a month ago. You know, yeah, absolutely. I do not hold, if I'm gonna have, I have the same conversations with the international donors as I do with the
And I'm sure they don't listen, and I'm sure they don't
They
listen.
do, they do, they listen, but the nature of, I'm gonna say leadership, the nature of what keeps in place is a sense of I as an individual cannot make an impact. So when particularly you're talking with government officials of any country, there's a sense of, well, yeah, what can I do? And
And-
that's what there is to penetrate.
And last question, because there's a person, Natalie wants to ask the question. Us as a society, as a people who are attending this program, what kind of role we can play?
I'm sorry, can you say that again? I didn't quite get that.
The people who are attending this program, because we're the people who came in and we care about the country. I personally care very much. As our ordinary people, what can we do? How
Well,
can we participate? How can we make a difference in the lives of Afghan people?
yeah, so that's my lesson. I don't have a good answer for you for that. I that's what I want to learn. Now, you're welcome, you know, to follow my journey. You're welcome to sign up for our newsletter.
Okay.
So you can be part of that. Please do. And I can make recommendations different ways. What's really funny, I actually have to say this to my board of directors, which is just being on this call, you're a witness. And your listening is important. We like to, as Americans in particular, fix things. But in fact, there's power in listening. So
Well,
I would consider,
everybody misses that skill, Marnie, not all Americans.
I'm just
Thank you so
saying,
much, Natalie. Natalie
no,
has a
that's my
question.
way of saying, you know, you took the time, you're here, you're listening, you're looking for new ways, you're looking for different conversations. You know, I welcome that. I'm empowered by that, and I appreciate that. And you can tell I'm tired.
Mhm.
So that's important, not to diminish just participating in whatever way that you can.
Natalie, did you have a question?
Sure, yeah. Thank you so much, Marnie, for sharing your work with us. It is truly incredible work that you are doing. I wish for you that you become less tired and have people taking care of you as well. I'm not sure where you're calling in. It's
I'm
it's
calling
my
in
first
from
time
Seattle,
from Seattle. Okay.
and when I
Um,
go and work with my kids, I get re-energized, just, you know. So I'm always tired of back in the
So
US.
you're from the King County area.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that you know, there are Afghans here in our region. In fact, the South King County area is a large there's a large community of Afghans. So people don't, you know, we don't have to go very far, and our neighbors are Afghans. There are Afghan markets, there are Afghan cultural events,
Mhm.
there are associations. And so, you know, when I guess I was curious to know if I wanted to make sure people on the call here realize that, and also wondering if you are plugged into the Afghan community here in the Puget Sound region, because they're
I'm
very
plugged in.
active.
I'm plugged into their relatives they left behind. Those are my people.
Mm-hmm.
And in extraordinary stories of how difficult it is to immigrate. So I'm not plugged into the Afghan community here by choice. And I'm thrilled hearing that they are being welcomed and becoming a part of your community. But my work is there with the people that haven't been able to come to America. But please, I think the best thing is having an Afghan in your life.
Hey, so
I agree.
so Marnie, we're past time. I wonder if you could take one more question to finish up with.
Mhm.
And it's from CLH Connolly. And I don't know if you want me to read this or you'd like to ask this yourself about the life of an average woman. But maybe I'll read the question.
Okay.
And the question is, can you tell us what the life of an average woman is like? How old when she gets married? How many children? And any employment outside the home?
It depends on family by family. They're, traditionally, I'd say the majority of them, that's a very traditional home is the place of the women and work is the place of the men. Men go out and shop and take the kids to the doctors. And that's really true right now because it's a very traditional government. But Afghan women, and this is another, I would say, little known story, they have quite a bit of power and say so in their homes. They work hard, they do all of the laundry, they do all of the cooking. And Afghan women are not victims. Afghan women are extremely strong in their culture. So I don't know what else to say. I'm happy to introduce you. So one of the things I'm going to be doing is I've asked Makbul and Seema, the girls who've been with me for a long time, to start up an online talk show, their own talk show. We'll see what they do. Should be interesting. Where people can join and ask them questions directly. So one of the things I'm working on with Philip Pallotta is getting leaders who are Afghan on my staff directly in communication with internationals where you can ask these questions. And they can tell you what it is to be an Afghan girl or an Afghan woman. So that information will be available through our newsletter.
And Amy, our administrator, has added the link to sign up for the newsletter in the
Right.
chat as well, if anyone is interested in.
They're fun to talk to, you guys, and Afghans are funny. That's what people don't know. They have a wicked senses of humor. They love
Yeah.
to tease, and they're funnier than all get out. And some of the things they come up with as a way of coping is just amazing. That's to say, I'm glad you guys can find Afghans here. And the situation for Afghans who have migrated is very tough right now.
Definitely. And I have a good friend who's an Afghan as well. And I've asked him before, what do you miss about Afghanistan, or what do you, wish people would know about Afghanistan? And he always says the food, he misses the food and how good the food is, and the people, how amazing and resilient the people are. So, yeah, something to keep in mind for sure going forward. So, Marnie, thank you so much. This was an incredible program, and really appreciate all of your time and insights as well. Couldn't thank you enough. So we look forward to staying in touch over the newsletter, and yeah, looking forward to the talk show too as well. So yeah, I guess any last words, Marnie, at all before
No,
we
just thank you very much. Very, very much for listening and for being on here.
Yeah,
You go get some rest.
yes, yeah. Get some rest, yes. And then for all of our attendees tonight, we will be sending out a survey for all of you, and we would love to have your feedback on tonight's program, and we look forward to seeing that. So watch out for that in your email inboxes as well. So thank you so much, Marnie. Again, really appreciate it, and everyone else have a great rest of your night or day, wherever you are, whatever time zone you're in. And thank you so much for attending tonight's program.
Thank you. It was
Thank you,
wonderful.
Marnie. Thank you,
Marnie.
Amy.
you.
Thank you so much. Have a